Chapter 11. San Diego or Bust. Karianne's breathing stopped as the phantom of the fountain finished his serenade. So did the music in her mind and in her heart. No, 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 she answered the proposal as her breath returned. She started throwing her things into her suitcase. I gotta get out of here, she repeated, along with why? Please don't leave, pleaded Ken, hoping to salvage the situation, for he truly desired to spend the rest of his life with her. Stay the night and go in the morning if you must. Why did you have to ruin everything? She said as she opened the door and walked out muttering, I need a shot of tequila. She marched the bar across Las Vegas Avenue, where she called Steph from a payphone while the bartender poured her 2 shots. What's the matter? I'm having a panic attack. What happened? Ken proposed. Oh my God, he did? Fuck yes, the bastard. What are you going to do? Get out of here as soon as I can. Look, why don't you come over here for the weekend? John has a property he wants to show you. I'll be on the first flight when the cock cries. Can you pick me up at the airport? See you at the gate. You're the best. Love you. Love you too. She slammed back the shots, caught a taxi to the airport, drank a margarita, and curled up on a row of empty seats near the gate, falling into a fitful sleep as refrains from the phantom echoed in her head. That was as close as Karianne, who at the time feared marriage would slow her down, ever got to the altar. That weekend, Karianne confided to Steph she needed a change, and that she'd moved to San Diego to live with a view and sound of ocean waves and be closer to her friend. She started researching work opportunities. Fortunately, San Diego is a technopolis for life science companies, and with her successful track record, there were plenty of possibilities. When Karianne learned about a position with Pfizer's La Jolla operations, she made the move. Karianne knew when purchasing investment property, it should be done with the possibility that someday you may have to live in it. So when she accepted the position with Pfizer, she already owned a house in nearby La Jolla and moved in after the tenant's lease expired. The relationship between the three amigas pivoted as Karianne, because of proximity, grew closer to Steph, as Jenny Lee was out of sight and became a bit more out of mind, though their friendship remained close, so that any time they talked by phone or met, they picked right up where they left off without skipping a beat. Karianne was confident that someday, somewhere, she would find a good match. Until then, her friendship with Steph and John filled her need for companionship. She had work to keep her busy, a house to redecorate, and plants to care for. When she achieved President's Club for Outstanding Sales with an award trip to Maui, Karianne brought Steph with her. John was a practical man's man who could fix anything, from the Studebaker he was rebuilding to every piece of winemaking equipment that stopped working for Paul. He was a good match for Steph, who welcomed stability and security after her disappointing first marriage. What of her longing for children? Since John was more than 10 years older, also divorced, and the father of 2 grown children, he hadn't the slightest desire for more offspring. Therefore, Steph insisted on a puppy, saying, My dog is my baby. In a way, Karianne also became Steph's child, while Steph's companionship filled the lonesome hole in Karianne's heart. John sought a community without building code restrictions. San Diego zoning laws and the California Coastal Commission's regulations made it a hassle to remodel your home, even your garage, if you lived in a seaside community, and neighbors complained about car parts strewn about his lawn. So he and Steph moved to the country, where you could even live in a trailer while your dream house was constructed, to a property with an avocado grove. You could live your whole life on San Diego's coast, not knowing this area of scenic hills, rocky outcrops, meadows punctured by giant boulders, and inspiring views existed a few miles inland. Perhaps that's why they called it Hidden Hills. People didn't know it's here and keep driving by on the 15. During the mid-1990s, until shortly after the turn of the century, travel south of the border was easy and relatively safe. Civilians weren't targeted by drug cartels, unless you were a Japanese business executive working at your company's Tijuana Maquiladora worried about kidnapping. You drove across the border with a driver's license and would wave through or walk through a turnstile from San Diego into Tijuana, where no one checked documents. Tijuana and Rosarito Beach had long been destinations for Americans looking for excitement on the edge, a place where you could check your brain at the border, similar to what Karianne and Jenna Lee experienced crawling down Austin 6th Street. After Karianne settled into her new position, she made plans with Steph and John to spend a weekend in Rosarito and Ensenada. They drove to the coastal lobster village outside Rosarito, where Karianne tried fried langoustine lobster. After Steph assured her it tastes like chicken, she spat it out. The cuisine in Ensenada, 50 miles further south, was an eye-opener, as Karianne experienced a hot Mexican meal above tacos, tamales, and burritos. They dined at a restaurant with steaks and trimmings as good as in Paris, France, not Texas. And more astonishing was discovering the house wine they enjoyed was vented a few miles away. Good wine from Mexico? How could that be? Guadalupe Valley, 25 miles inland from Ensenada, shared a wine history similar to California. Grapes were brought by the Spanish, who established vineyards in the early 1700s, and later by enterprising Italians, who brought their passion and desire for wine. Some entrepreneurs went beyond making an annual supply each year in their basement. One of those patriarchs was Angelo Cetto, who established a wine empire, the local version of Robert Mondavi. Karianne, Steph, and John decided to explore Valle de Guadalupe before returning to San Diego. They drove east, up a road that rose in elevation, leaving the coast behind. The temperatures grew warmer, but the climate was relatively cool, and as they entered the valley, they came upon green shoots and rows of grapevines. Karianne, whose internal sundial began pointing towards retirement, took her wineglass and walked among the vines, saying to herself, like thousands of other baby boomers, "Wouldn't it be nice to have a vineyard when I retire?" Alluring music of the vines penetrated her skull. That, or the second glass of wine, reached her brain. "I'll save money in retirement making my own wine, since I won't have much income and Napa wines are getting expensive." Such were the thoughts that crept into her head. The songs sung by Mexican vines in Baja, as inspiring as vines anywhere, perhaps enhanced by the novelty of being in a foreign country, and the third glass of wine. "Hey, Steph," said Karianne, "if grapes go so well 25 miles inland from Ensenada, they ought to grow pretty good 25 miles inland from San Diego's coast, right?" "You think so?" John said, "I've heard there's wineries out in Ramona, a rural community 25 miles northeast of downtown San Diego." "Is that right?" said Karianne. "Well, let's check 'em out next week." A vineyard laborer approached. "Buenas tardes, senor," said Karianne. "Buenas tardes," he responded. "Hey, Steph, ask him how often they water the vines." "Senor, how often do you water the vines?" she asked in English. "What the heck? I could have asked him that," said Karianne. "Ask him in Spanish." "Why do you think I speak Spanish?" she snapped. "My family were in Tejas before yours. In fact, my people helped your ancestors clear their land and build their homes." "Geez, Steph, hold your horses. I'll ask him myself." But the vineyard hand didn't understand her. They went inside and found a tan man with white hair and a broad smile who spoke English, with a unique combination of Spanish and Italian accents. Karianne shared with him her idea. "So you want to grow the grapes in San Diego?" Camilla asked. "I think it's a good idea. Good soil in San Diego similar to here and less salty." "Which varietals would you recommend?" "Italian, of course. The Italians grow well here, just like in Italy. In fact, better here. More sun. Taste this." He poured a sample. "Oh my God, this is really good," said Karianne. "It's amazing," said Steph. "I've never had anything like it," said John. "What is it?" asked Karianne. "It's a Nebbiolo," said Camilla, refilling their glasses. "I've never heard of it." "Very good grape of Italy, from Piemonte, my home region. It is a grape used to make the Barolo wine." "I'm not familiar with it," said John. "You have much to learn. When you go back to San Diego, go to Belle Marie Winery and ask for Mick. He buys grapes for me. He will help you." Camilla had planted a Noah's Ark of varietals in Guadalupe Valley to learn which grew best. Mick joked. Camilla smuggled cuttings of Italian wines in his suitcase whenever he returned from trips to the old country. Howsoever the clones were imported, the vines grew, and the wine was good. The proof was in the tasting. With the bare root cutting of a vine idea inserted into her head, grapes could grow in San Diego. Karianne thought over and over on the drive back, "I can do this." Thus began her quest for the perfect plot of land. A couple of times each month, she explored San Diego's county's backcountry, from Rainbow to Ramona, from Rancho Santa Fe to Jamul, in search of the ideal piece of dirt. The quest went on for months, that continued for years. While you may think of San Diego as a metropolitan beach with a zoo, agriculture accounts for a significant portion of the county's economy, with over 6,000 family farms generating over $5 billion. At the time, San Diego was the #1 producer of avocados and nursery crops, and #2 in acres planted of guavas, pomegranates, limes, and macadamias. Karianne, who moved here for the ocean views, was surprised by the diverse topography, landscapes, and vistas inland. John had enough common sense not to plant vines, despite pleas from Steph, who contracted a mild case of infectious vineyard disease from Karianne. John was immune to the virus from high levels of common sense hormones. He eased his wife's infection by buying her cases of Napa wines, upon Karianne's recommendations, and allowing her to piggyback off Karianne's dream. He knew spending a few $1,000s on good wine was a better investment than spending tens of thousands making wine that might not turn out good. Not to mention all the time he'd lose helping Steph care for the vines outside and wine in their cellar. John countered his wife's wine longings by adopting another puppy. She was happy, and he had more time to tinker. He was willing to help Karianne find her dream property, especially if his wife could help in the vineyard as a quick fix for her crazy lady junkie addiction. Karianne approached her property hunt with as much analysis and rigor as her stock picking. She refused to let emotion drive her purchase, unless a property met her requirements for price, lot size, soil structure, and the house was livable. With the perseverance of a lioness with growing hunger, she closed in on her prey. One day, John told her about a Spanish-style hacienda with multiple buildings, family fruit trees, and several acres of undeveloped land. The home's roof extended 10 feet beyond the outer walls. The wraparound porch was covered with and extended the living space. When Karianne saw it, she imagined outside tables filled with guests, warmed by heat lamps, and chimeneas for alfresco dining and tasting her vintage wines. It was love at first sight and met all her requirements with a huge plus. The property was close to Steph and John's. She purchased the house that was a dream and made it into a dream house. She tore down interior walls to enlarge living spaces. She replaced the yellow algae green moss concrete roof tiles with thick, artistic Mediterranean clay tiles. She restuccoed the house's outside smooth as Santa Barbara homes. She planted blood oranges and Myers lemons, remembering the first home she visited in California, where she picked her own. She built a wood-fired oven outside for pizza and wine parties. And then there were palms. Unlike Paul, who grew up in California and viewed palms as weeds, Karianne stood in awe of every palm she met. There had been some palms in her San Antonio neighborhood, but they were not her palms. She planted queens and kings and installed a mature Phoenix Canarias date palm that cost $10,000. Miguel took fronds he trimmed from neighbors' palms and made a Polynesian-style hut for entertaining. Karianne carved out paths of white pebbles and walkways that meandered between large live oaks. She bulldozed boulders into rock gardens, surrounding them with succulents. The property was largely flat, but what she exchanged for mountain and ocean views was land easier to manage. John refurbished an electric golf cart she could drive to all corners of her property. An animal menagerie next door housed a rooster, mule, and peacocks, who were nature's morning alarm. Karianne was an early riser, welcomed their calls, and after a few months became immune to the brash bays and hee-haws of the mule. This was life in the country, and she loved it. After remodeling, she hired Miguel to prepare the vineyard. They cleared the land and tilled the soil, adding nutrients. They installed end posts, dug trenches, and laid water pipes underground with electric lines so irrigation could be controlled centrally with a switch box. And following Camilo's suggestion, she researched Italian varietals and ordered bare root vines from Nova Vines Nursery in Northern California a year in advance. 6 weeks away from planting, she made the call to Texas. "Hey you, it's me. How y'all doing?" "Karianne, oh my God, is that you?" asked Jenny Lee, her heart pounding. "It's so good to hear your voice. Guess what?" "What, sugar?" "I started a winery." "Shut up." "Yes, I did. You gotta come out here. We're having a planting shindig next month. Me and Steph want you here to celebrate. Girl, I'm on my way." Jenny Lee arrived. The cougar roared, and Karianne decided on the winery's name and the tattoo. Merlot Mac's entry to grape growing was anything but a lifelong dream. He was approached by a local winery with an offer he couldn't refuse. If Mac grew the grapes, the winemaker would purchase the fruit and make the wine and deliver 4 cases to boot, which Mac could drink with his friends on the deck overlooking the vineyard. Since Mac needed landscaping for his hillside, he calculated a vineyard costs less than buying trees, shrubs, and pouring concrete walkways. So he agreed. The winery introduced Mac to Miguel to put in the vineyard infrastructure. 3 years later, as the vines carried their first commercial crop, the winery went bankrupt, leaving Mac with all the grapes, about which he knew practically nothing. And so, as fortune, luck, or curse would have it, he had several tons of orphan grapes needing a home. He scrambled and found wineries in San Diego and Temecula to purchase the fruit, barely covering his expenses, and decided to learn how to make wine and attended meetings of San Diego's Amateur Winemaking Society. When he hosted a meeting at his vineyard, the home winemakers salivated at the long rows of ripening Merlot. Mac offered to sell grapes to the amateurs, and they offered to pick. Word quickly spread about Merlot grapes for sale. If you ever went to a Grateful Dead concert, you'd see deadheads come out of the woodwork, descending to the stage, and so it was with the wineheads, amateur winemakers who at the hint of grapes appear, looking to score a good grape at a good price. In the spirit of pick your own, you pick it, the kind of social movement encouraged by the Bootleggers Express, the amateurs brought friends and a picnic to the harvest for an impromptu grape stock, where Karianne met Mac and picked grapes for the first wine. Now, they were neighbors. The Merlot grape is as noble and scandalous as the royals of England. When the movie Sideways came out lampooning Merlot, the same year Karianne made her first Merlot wine, Mac took it in stride and said, "Good wine is made from grapes crushed by the feet of noble maidens, while fine wine is made by grapes crushed with their breasts. I didn't see any Pinot Noir in that movie crushed so delicately." The professional boutique wineries that made wine from Mac's grapes reported Mac's Merlot powered their best-selling wine year after year. The harvest party at Mac's couldn't be beat, except by Joe the Wino, who owned Hidden Hill's largest vineyard. Whereas most of our vineyards were backyard ventures planted by garagistes, Joe was the definition of the rich businessman who created $1 million winery by investing $2 million. Paul calculated he produced the most expensive wines in the area based on what he paid for his land at the height of the real estate bubble and his limited production. But whereas Paul's close to $1 million investment, when you included his house, property, and every expense, yielded 200 cases a year, Joe the Wino's output was closer to 5,000 cases, modest by Napa or Paso Robles standards, but large for San Diego County. Across the entrance to Hidden Hills, just off the 15, was Belle Marie Winery, founded by Mick and Mary Dragoo. If all the little wineries popping up were planets in our solar system, Joe the Wino equals Jupiter, Karianne equals Venus, Paul equals Mars. Belle Marie was the sun around which the others orbited. Dr. Mick Dragoo was a maestro dental oral surgeon who retired at 40 to pursue personal interests, although he continued to lecture and teach in the dental field around the world, allowing him to visit vineyards and wineries everywhere he traveled. As a genius, he was smart enough to stay out of the farming business, except to consult growers about his fruit requirements. Belle Marie started by sourcing grapes locally from Guadalupe Valley in Mexico, from the same Camilo whose vines and wines Karianne discovered on her own. It was in Belle Marie's interest to foster the growth of vineyards closer to home as a fruit source, and what could be more satisfying for Mick than mentoring a new generation of wine growers? Lum Eisenman, the patriarch of San Diego winemakers, worked as a consultant to Belle Marie that offered winemaking workshops, many led by Lum. Belle Marie became an incubator for emerging winemakers who drove from as far away as Temecula, Jamul, and Ramona. Karianne, with more than an amateur's interest, joined the advanced class, asked the other winemakers lots of questions, kept a journal, and began devouring every book and article she could find on winemaking. Winemakers are a cooperative bunch who share their know-how with each other, even though they compete for the mouths and pocketbooks of every person in the area over 21. A rising tide raises all dinghies and ships, and the goal of San Diego's wineries was to see the region develop into a world-class destination, with boutique wineries and tasting rooms throughout the county. Winemakers in Ramona established their own AVA winery region, and other communities were looking at doing the same, including Highland Valley. While the winemakers had vision, local government erected all kinds of hurdles, impeding boutique wineries with limited financial resources. But that's a whole other story. It would be polite to say Karianne's early efforts were promising. Her first wines were interesting. Carolyn, who led the legal effort educating San Diego County zoning officials on revising regulations to allow boutique wineries as a right of zoning on agricultural land, called Karianne's first Nebbiolo wine made from Camilo's grapes inky. What was missing was, it's inky and it's the best wine I've ever tasted. Paul, who had no sense of smell, politely said he liked her wine, but Bluey, who was partial to the aromas of rotting rodent carcasses and other dogs' asses, didn't like her wine at all, and neither did Sheila. When Karianne gave all the neighbors a wine gift basket for that Christmas, Karianne used it for sangria in summer, mulled spice wine in winter, and bouffe bourguignon in the fall. Every June, the San Diego County Fair sponsored a winemaking competition, one for amateurs and one for professionals, in which all the winemakers entered except Mick, who philosophically didn't believe in judges' ratings. Karianne, who submitted a Barbera, Montepulciano, and Nebbiolo, anticipated the results, and when other winemakers came away with gold and blue ribbons for commendable wines, she collected a bouquet of yellow ribbons, which was like getting C's in college in an era of great inflation. The judges' comments included uninspiring, acid too high, an abundance of sulfites, green and vegetative, hydrogen sulfide. And while her neighbor Paul, speaking of amateurs, had advanced to the professional level and obtained his licenses, Karianne's wine wasn't better than a dog's. Disappointed and pissed, She got pissed with Steph, complaining about the judges, the lousy grapes she had bought, the lousy barrels that ruined her wine, and the competition's format, which was rigged. "I know how you feel," sympathized Steph. "All through elementary school and junior high, I took ballet lessons. I was pretty good. In fact, I was damn good. But when we got into high school, the other girls were promoted ahead of me. I was so disappointed. I was better than them, but they grew, and I didn't." "You mean they grew tits?" "You got it. I was flat as a board and short. Even though I had better technique than the other girls, the instructor kept me back. And I had to practice with the little kids. I was so angry. But you know what happened?" "What?" "Junior year, 2 of the girls who matured earlier just kept growing." "You mean they grew into supermodels?" asked Karianne. "Breast big as udders. They lost their grace, and I matured and was promoted. Senior year, I got all the lead roles. And that's what's going to happen to you. You're a winner. You'll come out on top." "Thanks, Steph," said Karianne, giving her a hug. "You always make me feel better." That night, after Steph left, anger turned to tears. Karianne, a winner throughout her professional career, was not one to dwell on defeat, but to learn from it. She met Lum the next day with a plea for assistance. Lum, always helpful to new winemakers, saw in her the determination to succeed, and her science background would provide the necessary discipline. Every industry and region have their pioneers, founders, and Yodas from whom successful entrepreneurs and businesses trace their roots. The Bay Area had Dr. Shockley from Shockley Labs, whose offspring founded Intel and Silicon Valley. Where would Seattle be today without Bill Gates and Paul Allen, Microsoft, Howard Schultz and Howard Behar, Starbucks, and Jeff Bezos, Amazon? In San Diego, we have Dr. Irwin Jacobs, who founded Linkabit and then Qualcomm that spawned Telecom Valley, while John Moores, another Texas transplant, his obsession for building a new ballpark for his San Diego Padres baseball team ignited the boom in downtown redevelopment. Greg Stone, founder of Stone Brewery, and Mike White, who started Ballast Point Brewery, taught hundreds of future beer makers their craft. And when it came to San Diego wine, there was Lum. Lum Eisenman, trained in physics, and author of the authoritative The Home Winemaker's Manual. In retirement, became a consultant to many commercial winemakers in the area and practically all the amateurs, encouraging many to turn professional. When you draw up the genealogy of San Diego's winemakers, almost all had ties to Lum. Even new graduates from UC Davis Enology program learned a thing or two from him, although some said Lum's knowledge stopped when new winemaking began. The region's winemakers paid tribute to him each year with the Lum Eisenman wine competition. He was the godfather of San Diego wine, and in Karianne he found a Robin for his Batman, a Michael for his Don Corleone, while Paul's movie character is best described as Dumb and Dumber, playing both roles himself. Paul's winemaking was simplicity and purity, the grapes and fermentation, for whom ignorance was bliss, and he was happy until ignorance cost him a batch of wine, and more ignorance another batch. Lum started winemaking when he discovered untended vines growing wild along a highway fence near Rancho Cucamonga, at a time a thriving grape-growing area. Lum picked the grapes, made a wine he said washes down the pasta pretty good, and named it Côte du Freeway. When Paul heard that story, he took cuttings from Merlot Mac's vineyard, stuck them in the ground along his fence, and called that row Fence de Lum, claiming it produced the best grapes in his vineyard. Whereas Paul was like an amateur cook who made a good meal by chance, adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that, Karianne followed the recipe. Paul viewed himself as a winemaking artist, throwing in a little extra yeast here, moving fermenting grape skins from one varietal into a bubbling batch of another varietal, and pressing wine into what felt just right. Karianne became a winemaking engineer, chemist, and craft master, following the correct process to manufacture a consistently good product. If Paul achieved a few dozen likes with random posts of his dog and their paw-made wine, Karianne used statistics-driven marketing methods to cultivate and engage thousands. Karianne dug deeper into the winemaking process with Lum as her mentor. "You can't make good wine without good grapes," he told her. So she went back to the growers who supplied her and insisted on contracts to deliver fruit within specified ranges of sugars, acids, and pHs. No longer would she accept leftover grapes or buy grapes on sale. She insisted on high quality to her specifications. She began inquiring about new techniques. She learned from Merlot Mac about flex tanks, breathable polyurethane tanks from Australia that allow slow aging of wine more economical than barrels. After a surfing expedition to Indonesia, she swung down to Melbourne and Adelaide to meet Australian winemakers, taste wines aged in flex tanks, and inquire about their irrigation techniques that created wine with intense fruit flavors. She read about the development of new yeast strains that improve flavor and aromatics, and she experimented. She read about enzymes that increase flavor, color extraction, and yield by weakening grape cell membranes during fermentation. Lum literally wrote the book on winemaking and posted it online to freely share all his knowledge. Lum's manual provided an authoritative, step-by-step guide for home winemakers, and Karianne studied it like a cookbook when making her first batch. That manual stated the cap of fermenting must is supposed to rise. But what the heck is that supposed to look like? Is my cap a healthy cap? She couldn't tell because Lum's guide lacked good pictures, and where there were pictures, they were black, white, and blurry because they had been mimeographed on the paper manuscript before it was scanned and uploaded. She called Paul, who at that time had 2 weeks more winemaking experience, who described it this way. "Put freshly ground coffee into a press, add hot water, and you'll see coffee grinds rise to the top. That's what a cap of fermenting grape skins looks like. Take a spoon and stir. That's like punching down. All the color and flavor go into the wine, just like making good coffee." What Lum's manual needed wasn't coffee analogies, but detailed, high-resolution color photos, and, even better, videos. So Karianne started taking pictures and recording how-to videos on winemaking and posting, becoming one of the first wine bloggers. When YouTube emerged, she filmed instructional videos with Lum, generating thousands of views. Karianne needed Lum, and Lum, stuck in the typewriter age, used her to spread his winemaking know-how to a larger audience. Their videos were informative, authoritative, and fun, combining Lum's knowledge and experience with Karianne's enthusiasm and photogenic appeal. She embraced the new social media tools Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. The internet often rewarded those who were first, smart, responsive, and friendly in their communications, and those traits brought Karianne more followers. Broadband connections reached more and more homes, even out here in the Hidden Hills, and it became a golden era for blogs, social media marketing, and possible for an unknown winemaker to become known. First using the moniker San Diego Vino Girl, then transitioning to Cougar Karianne, she broadcast her message to the world, using new advertising technology to deliver paid ads cost-effectively to a highly targeted audience. When anyone searched for San Diego wine, organic results linked to her website or videos. And once she went Cougar, the number of followers accelerated. Karianne stayed active in the local chapter of Women in Business, continued attending professional meetings of local marketing executives, and stayed up to date with technology. And if she was uncertain about the finer details of search engine optimization, retargeting, or Google Analytics, she hired college students part-time to assist with technical aspects of her social media presence and to tutor her. Her status and clout on social media sites soared as Karianne, always photogenic and full of Texas charm, explained details of winemaking and her wines, reaching a large audience unimaginable a few years before. 2 years later, it was Karianne's Merlot, using grapes grown by Mac, that won gold at Del Mar Fair. In fact, she won more blue ribbons than anyone else. Karianne was about science, measurement, and process. She always knew the numbers, acid, pH, and sugar of grapes in her vineyard, and the chemistry of wine in her barrels. She was never too tired to skip a measurement, titration, or chemical analysis in the immaculate lab she set up, measuring sulfites, malic acid, and VA, the acid in wine that could become vinegar. Her methods were scalable, and while she and Paul both eventually made decent wine, the number of people across the country who bought and enjoyed hers was an order of magnitude greater. Paul asked Karianne to teach him how to calibrate a pH meter, how to measure acid, and how to measure sulfites, reminding him of his 8th grade science partner who drove him to distraction with her looks, thinking Karianne would make a great winemaking partner as he entered his new adolescence. But Karianne chose Lum. Years later, when Lady Gaga partnered with Tony Bennett, Paul said to Karianne, "You did this 10 years earlier with Lum. From now on, I'm calling you Wine Gaga, Karianne the Cougar." She blew him a kiss, and he sighed. For Lum, Prise de Mousse yeast was the be-all and end-all of yeast that produced perfect fermentations. He conceded a new strain of yeast might produce a more fruitful bouquet during fermentation, but after the wine had aged a couple of years, it all came out in the wash, and you couldn't tell a difference. He wouldn't switch from what worked. Who was right? The righteous old patriarch, or the new, up-and-coming generation of winemakers experimenting and pushing the boundaries of an ancient craft? You be the judge, and taste for yourself. Karianne's winemaking improved, and she scored par for the course. She built a tasting room at her ranch, always referring to her property as a ranch as if it were in Texas. Guests were infatuated by the cougar, who wore a fox stole over her shoulders winter days as she entertained in her tasting lair, guarded by a mountain lion's head mounted to the wall. Haters and California's animal rights groups objected to the cougar's head. She didn't care. She was a huntress from a hunting family. She was proud of the beast, her namesake above the door, mounted higher than the longhorns and lasso. She knew from her market research most customers would be women, many of a certain age with disposable income, and some with a certain lifestyle that, given a glass or two of wine, became huntresses. Paul serenaded her. "And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. Cougar has a glass of wine for you. Ooh, and take a sip, Mrs. Robinson. All the boys will come to you to play. Hey, 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 hey. They will come to me and pay," she replied. Cougar Winery became a popular destination for strong women and those who admired them. The women signed up for the Cougar Club because they liked the wine and lifestyle it signified, while men signed up to offer the wine as a gift to those they pursued. If patrons asked Karianne for a date, she warned, "I'll break your heart. If you want to show me some love, buy some wine." They could only oblige, and her tasting room sales and Cougar Club grew. As she raked in more money, she invested in bigger and better equipment, while Paul persisted in doing everything by hand. Like the tiger in golf, the cougar wasn't satisfied making par. She wanted to disrupt. She was as fierce a competitor as the tiger, for she was the cougar. She was smarter than most men, earned more than most men, and sold more than most men, and was better looking than all men. So when it came to the art of the grape, her goal was to make better wine than most men. Competitiveness was her DNA. She knew she had to do something different, something unique, to rise above the ranks and noise of average winemakers to achieve greatness. The idea that propelled her forward came from the most unexpected of places, a letter from home. Karianne's mother sent a newspaper clipping from the front page of the living section of the San Antonio Express-News about San Antonio's Dr. Robert W. Young, M.D., who started a winery in the hill country town of Comfort, near the spot Karianne gutted the deer hit by her mother's car. The doctor, to borrow Jenny Lee's words, was doing crazy shit, using Syro technology to freeze grape juice and skins immediately after the crush, combined with extended macerations to produce high-quality wine from Texas grapes. Yes, from Texas. Another technique the doctor used was thermoflash fermentation, heating the grape must quickly to 160 degrees to kill unwanted fungus and microorganisms and extract 100% of the flavors. This seemed counterintuitive to Karianne, who did everything in her power to harvest grapes at their coolest. Wouldn't heating the fruit make the wine taste like berry pie? Karianne called home. "Hey, Mom, it's me. Thanks for the article. Did you actually go to this winery?" "Yes, dear, we did. We stopped there after visiting your grandparents' graves. Bless their hearts." "How was the wine?" "I liked it." "Better than mine?" Susanna loved her daughter, and, as an experienced schoolteacher, wasn't going to say she preferred Texas wine over her daughter's. The silence provided the answer. "Never mind," said Karianne. "Did you meet Dr. Young?" "No, we didn't. He was in San Antonio. But we met the tasting room manager, and we also spoke with the winemaker. We told them about you, and they said they'd love for you to visit." "Thanks, Mom. I'll see about getting out there soon. Love you." And she hung up and dialed Lum and told him about the Syro fermentation. "Sounds interesting." "Holy horse dookie, Lum, could this be true?" "In theory, it could work. I'd like to know more." "I'll be right over," said the apprentice, who rushed to the home of San Diego's patron winemaker to review the article and do online research. "It says right there, the Syro fermentation process pulled more total tannins, altered syrids, and pigment from the grapes," said Karianne. "What about a third-party scientific study?" "I did some research," said Lum, "and found a paper written by Dr. Young presented to the Texas Association of Winemakers. His trial on Cabernet Sauvignon resulted in Syro fermentation, extracting 78% more tannin and 68% more total pigment than regular fermentation." "What's the downside?" asked Karianne. "Says here there could be less aromatics." "What about too much tannin?" she asked. "Well, there's only one thing to do. Go there and taste for yourself." Karianne booked a flight to San Antonio.